Well, hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be doing a walkthrough tutorial on how to make a beehive candle. These are super cute candles. They look really cute on a shelf. You can burn them if you want. And um, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping to start. So once we get started into the making, I'm going to turn this feed off and we'll focus on the second camera feed, which is coming from my phone, and that's over here. I'll stick my hand in the frame over here. And we have all of the supplies and everything set up over there. So to start with, over in the chat window, I am going to put a link to the instructions for making the beehive candle. So you're welcome to click through and you can follow along, or you can use the instructions later to make your own candle. Okay, so I'm going to turn this feed off right now. And we're going to go over to the camera feed over here. So I have put all of the items you'll need to make a beehive candle here. So I have a heat gun here. You can also use a hair dryer. I have a knife. I'm using an X-Acto knife. You can use a pizza cutter, the sharp edge of a ruler. There's lots of options. There's a ruler here. This one I purchased from Lee Valley, and it's a 24-inch ruler. It's fantastic because it's long enough you can cut one whole sheet at once. Then over here, right here, I have my wick and some scissors to cut the wick. We've got our instruction sheet here, the beeswax sheet underneath, and over here at the top I have, it's just a can, and I'm using this as a safety feature. I'm using an X-Acto knife and it's very sharp. I cut off a little bit of my fingernail and that was not a fun experience, so I do not want to repeat that. So I highly recommend, if you're using knives of any sort, use a block that will keep your fingers away from the knife blade. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to clear off some of the items here until we get exactly what we need handy. So to start off, as we're making a beeswax candle, we're going to start with the beeswax sheet here. And it may be a little bit hard to see, but there is a little bit of bloom on the sheet. I'm going to move it closer to the camera. And it's a little hard to tell, so I did bring another color, more colored tea light to demonstrate this as well. So I'll put that in the camera. So this is the tea light I'll be demonstrating on as well. So this bloom, it takes away some of the stickiness of the beeswax. So we want to take the bloom off of the candle to make it a little bit easier to roll, and also warming up the wax will help make it easier to work with. So I'm going to take the heat gun here and I'm going to take the bloom off of the sheet. And you may be able to see, we'll see how it looks on the camera. When I start to take the bloom off, the color should shine through. And in case you're wondering, the color I'm using for today's project, it's called Stuart Gold. This is a natural color of wax. We have two. There's the Stuart Gold and the natural. They're kind of similar in color. The Stuart Gold tends to be a little bit more gold, and the natural is a little bit lighter. Okay, so here we go. So I'll pause for a minute. You can see the difference in the color already, for up here where the heat has hit it and over here where we still have bloom on the sheet. So you can see the color difference. And when you're working with the heat gun, you want to be very careful not to melt through the beeswax sheet. Okay, and what I like to do is get most of the bloom off of one side, and then I'll flip it over and take the bloom off the other side. The second side is usually much quicker because most of the bloom is already off. Now I'm going to show you with this tea light candle. It's actually blue. It looks pretty white on screen, but I'll show you how the bloom comes off of this candle. That's quite a difference already. And you can also take the bloom off using a soft cloth. So over here on this part of the candle, if I just rub it, you can see the bloom starting to come off. And this is an aesthetic thing too, so once your candle is finished, there will be bloom that reappears on your candle over time. It's nothing to worry about. You can get rid of it by gently heating your candle up again, being careful not to melt it, or you can leave it. Some of the colors look really pretty with the bloom. Some of the colors, the whites for example, you can't even tell there's bloom on it. It just gives, when you take it off, it gives the candle a little bit more of a shine. So let's finish taking bloom off of this. Alright, so we have a beautiful blue tea light. That's quite different from before. Alright, so next step in our candle making process, we're going to bring the instructions back out here and grab a ruler and a knife. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out all of the markings that are on our instruction sheet. So I have my ruler over on the edge and I'm going to mark all of these points. I'm just going to create a little bit of a notch, big enough for me to see, at each of the measurements on here. Perfect. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Super. Okay, so once we have all of our notches made, we're going to cut as shown on the page. Now this cut, the E piece, if you can read that, so that's this little tiny piece here. This can be the trickiest one in the beehive candle. We're going to be matching up the notches from side to side, and sometimes what happens here, because this notch here for the E piece is the same notch we're using for the A piece, sometimes people forget to leave that there. So they'll move the ruler down when we're doing the cutting down to the D piece marking down here instead of staying up there. So we'll be extra careful when we're doing the measurements there. So I'm going to put the ruler across, finding my notches. And it also helps if you lift, if you gently lift the wax, you can see exactly where your notches are. Now I'm going to take my handy dandy can to keep my fingers out of the way, and we're going to cut. And the can is going to make sure the wax doesn't move here. Once we have that piece done, we'll move it to the side. And then this is the tricky part, so we're going to leave the ruler on the right hand side and move the left hand side down to the next notch. And this can is not working very well to hold the ruler in place. So I've also used blocks of wood for this. They work really well because they kind of stick to the ruler a bit. There we go. Here's our next piece. We'll find the next notches. And I like to use metal rulers for this. I find they hold up well against a knife, so if your knife slips and it hits the metal, it's not a big deal, it just dulls your knife a little bit. Okay, one more piece. so now we have our pieces. They're not perfectly cut, but that's okay. The next step I like to do with these candles, if you look carefully at the instructions, we have different points. So we start, the biggest piece is 3" and it goes down to the 2.5". And if you see, there's also a matching 2.5" piece here. So if you look, these edges are going to be matched. So you're going to have 3 to 2.5, 2.5 to 2, 2 to 1.5, 1.5 down to 1, and then 1 to nothing. So basically, to make this candle, we're creating a giant triangle. And to have a really good result, what I like to do is take the pieces that match. So here's the 3" piece, and this is the 2.5" edge. And we're going to put them together beside each other to see if they are the same height. These ones look good, so we'll leave those. And then we'll go to the next piece. Put them together. These ones, there's a little bit of a difference. It's not going to make a big difference in the candle, but if you want, you can cut off a little bit of the piece before to make sure they are exactly equal. And if there is a huge difference between the two pieces, what I'll do is mark it, and then I'll take this piece and go from the marking to the end that's already been measured correctly, and you just cut off the extra. So here's the next piece. Those ones are looking good. And the final piece. And I'm just taking off all these little stray pieces and putting them to the side. There we go. This is looking great. So what I've done is I've stacked all of my pieces as they're measured, stacked them up from biggest to smallest, and now we're ready to start rolling. So I'm going to grab the biggest piece. We're starting with the biggest piece. And the next step is to measure the wick. So I'm going to show you a fancy way. I actually have a candle here. This is a solid candle, and the top of the candle is just straight up. So that is one option for your rolled candle. You can leave your wick out the top. Another option is to do a loop, and I'm going to demonstrate the loop today. So, to measure the wick, you want to put it right against the bottom, all the way to the top, and you can choose how long your wick is going to be, cut it to size. We're going to do the loop, so I'm going to measure the loop out, and we're just going to do a little loop. And where you want to cut this, you want to be able to pull the wick out of the top of the candle before you burn it. So if your wick is too far down, you're not going to be able to pull it up to light it. And that's going to reduce your burn time. You can trim it at the top, but you're creating a double wicked candle, so that's going to make your candle burn a little bit quicker. So we've got our little loop, and I'm going to cut our wick. Okay, so the next step, we're going to gently start rolling the wax over the wick. So I've very gently, I'll bring it closer to the camera so you can see, I very gently started to bring that wax up over the wick. And I'm also going to fold my wick over and create my loop and start working that in. So I'm just going to gently manipulate the wax to get it started. This is the most challenging part. I don't know if this wick is deep enough. I think it's okay. This is the most challenging part about making rolled candles, is getting started. So what we're doing is we're rolling as tight as possible, and you want to keep the bottom as flat as you can. The top is going to start to spiral pretty soon. We'll be able to see it. And that is giving the beehive look. So I'm rolling along, and you can see it's getting easier, so we can go a little bit quicker, keeping that bottom nice and flat. And if your bottom starts to bulge out a little bit, you can turn the candle up and press down a little, and it should pop down. So we're rolling as tightly as we can and keeping that bottom nice and flat. Okay, so we're at the beginning of the first piece. So I'm going to grab the second biggest piece. We're going to attach that on here. So I like to overlap the wax a little bit, and I'm going to line up the bottom so it stays flat. I'm going to roll the candle until that bottom piece comes up. So you can see here, I'll bring it a little bit closer, it's not quite even. So the bottom piece is not flush with the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll lift it up, adjust the candle until it is even, and put it back. And then what I'm going to do is gently press the new piece down so it sticks, and the piece we finished, I'm going to fold it over top. And then we're going to keep on rolling. Keeping it nice and tight, the bottom flat. I like to put pressure on this part of the candle because the top, as you can see, it's starting to form that beehive shape. Okay, so we get to the end. Add the next piece. And sometimes they don't actually stick all the way up, so I just let them go until the top is, until the piece from the last bit is about at the top, and then I bring the bottom up to match. Up to meet it, and we gently press them together and continue rolling. Now we're getting to smaller pieces, so sometimes it's easier to fold the wax around. And that's something I use for sure on the last piece. Sometimes I use that technique on the last two pieces. We'll get this second last piece going. Oh, and if there's a little cut in there like we had here, so there's this piece that's not, that had a little bit of a cut in it, I just squish it in. Okay, so we're down to our last piece, and this piece, because it's so thin, it can be a bit of a challenge to work with. So this is where I tip the candle up, and I'm pressing in the side, pressing the pieces together, and I'm going to rotate the wax around. And I'm going to gently press it in as we go until we get to the end. Now, once we're at the very end of our candle, I'm going to take about the last time around, maybe a little bit further, and I'm going to gently press it in. We're pressing the wax in so it stays in place. It's not going to come unrolled on you. And this one, it looks like I didn't quite roll it tight enough, so I'm going to start back a little further and we'll go around. Just gently pressing it in. All the way to the end. Awesome. And then you can press it down with your hands gently to flatten out the bottom. You can smooth out these edges, make them a little bit smoother if you'd like, or you can leave it just how it is. So there is our beautiful beehive candle with our fancy looped wick. So we'll see if it'll stay. Doesn't want to stay, so we'll just get a top view. All right. So there you have it, a super easy way to make a beehive candle. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. You can email us at info@yycwax.com, or you can check out any of our social media channels. So we're available on Facebook at YYC Beeswax, Instagram at YYC Wax, Twitter at YYC Wax, and you're welcome to check out our Pinterest board. We're YYC Beeswax on Pinterest. We have a board full of so many rolled candle ideas, so you can get ideas for your own projects. So thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you.